listening to the Horror Shots Podcast.
Hello again and welcome to another Horror Shots Podcast with me, Casey. Today's cast is going to be a very special one as we look at women in horror. Yes, this February marks the 10th annual Women in Horror Month, which is a fantastic event, and I'll provide you with more details on that a little bit later on in the podcast. However, so often the horror industry has been associated with and dominated by men. The goriness, the violence, and the nudity all scream masculinity. But we are overlooking a few important details, most notably that in horror movies, it is always the girl that survives the attacks, outlasting all the men. It's about time we acknowledge the women in the industry, be it a world-famous actress like Jamie Lee Curtis or somebody at the grassroots level, like my guest today, Kristin Zaza. There's a name you may have heard me mention before on the cast. She's a writer, actor, podcaster, performer in general. Her storytelling style podcast, On a Dark, Cold Night, just posted its 51st episode. So without further ado, here is Kristin Zaza. Kristen, how's it going today?
It's going pretty well. How are you?
Pretty good, thanks. So, as I've mentioned already, Kristen is a podcaster, writer, actor, all sorts of fun stuff in the entertainment field. And being the Women's Month of Horror, or Women in Horror Month, I thought it would be a good time to get an interview out. So, Kristen, tell us about yourself.
Sure. First of all, thanks so much for wanting to do this. This is awesome. I guess I'll start with my background. My background, like you said, was in performance, specifically acting, and a lot of classical music as well. And I kept trying to, oddly enough, get into voice acting, which is such a hard game around these parts and probably everywhere. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. But basically, after a bunch of years of that, I came back to writing, which I think I delved into more when I was, in late high school, early undergrad. And I got a microphone for Christmas in 2017. And I just sort of decided to start this podcast that I didn't even know at the time was audio drama. I didn't even know anything about that world. But I just knew that I wanted to try writing stories, and I've always loved horror. And oddly enough, a podcast seemed to be the great way to take the best way to take everything that I do, which is, performing, writing, composing, and put it all into this one project, which has felt really good. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Awesome. Well, tell us about your podcast.
Yeah, so it's called On a Dark, Cold Night, and it's I've heard a lot of different phrases used for it, but in my own words, I call it a bedtime ghost story podcast, because I've always dealt with things like insomnia and sleep paralysis and just anything dreadful to do with sleeping I've dealt with. And obviously things like, sleeping with the TV on or, having something going in the background is not a great solution. So I wanted to sort of create something for people like me who also love all things spooky. I write a new story every week, and for the most part, they're standalone pieces. They're all told from the character. Well, most of them are told from the character of the narrator, who I created and have been developing over the last year through these stories. And some of them, every now and then, there is a story that deals with what's going on with her in a sort of cryptic, the strange through line. with all these stories. So it's sort of an anthology, but there's also a recurring plot.
Awesome. So you said you write all these, do you write them weekly? Do you write in batches? You do like 5 episodes at once and just kind of record as needed? Or how does that work? What's your process?
Oh man, I write them weekly, which perhaps is more evident certain weeks than others. But it was also sort of a challenge to myself to just be consistently writing. Mm-hmm. And since each episode is about anywhere between, I think the shortest one is maybe around 17 minutes and the longest one is around 30. Mm-hmm. So they sort of float in that range. And writing that much every week is, it's a challenge, but it's also not terribly unattainable. So it's a good, I found a good amount for me. I'm not writing a 45-minute to an hour episode a week, which I think would just be a little bit too much to take.
Yeah, especially since it's like all dialogue. There's no actions for the fillers.
Script. Well, and I actually try to avoid dialogue. I try to keep it as much of monologue, in a fairy tale structure, a storytelling. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's a lot of effort right there. Because it's between 17 and anywhere to 30 minutes. Is that your longest episode?
Yeah. Around there.
That's good. What, like 6,000 words? Maybe a little bit more?
I would say less than that, actually, maybe just because it's a relaxing podcast. So I speak kind of slowly.
Right.
Usually they're around, I would say between 2,000 and 4,000 words.
Right.
But that's also including plugs and thank yous and
right.
everything. So that's easy.
Yeah, that's easy. Copy and paste.
Which I do script because, whatever.
I don't forget anything. Yeah, no, because when I did the more structured podcast on my end here, I would write out these scripts I try to get 20 minutes out of. But they ended up being like 5,000 words. I guess I was talking way too fast. So I know where you're coming from. I'm like, that's a lot of work to put into the 20-minute podcast or audio drama in your case. But you did mention you have a performing background. And this is kind of a great step into the world of voice acting. It's a good portfolio piece, if nothing else, right?
Yeah. Thank you. I haven't. Again, oddly enough, I've sort of been out of that world. I do the occasional play now and then, but I haven't even been thinking of the podcast in terms of like a show, a voice reel or anything, which I've had in the past. I've done the whole voice reel thing and gone in for a few auditions, but it's a very
competitive field.
Yeah, and a very tight-knit circle.
Oh, yeah.
Because, it's not exactly the kind of thing where, I don't know, maybe this will sound callous, but people don't age out,
Right.
You can once you're in for a long time. Especially so I think getting in is hard.
Yeah. It's like that with any sort of media industry is, unless somebody dies, no positions open up.
Yeah.
As sad as that is. So when you started doing this and you mentioned, you're a fan of horror, what about, what kind of inspires you to bring in, the horror elements into this? Why didn't you do a more traditional, like detective style audio drama? Why did you lean towards kind of the way you did with the spooky storytelling and the somberness?
Well, first of all, I was talking with a friend recently who was like, is it technically horror? Like, is it just kind of creepy, or what do you, and I see that point because I have some rules for myself. Like I don't get too gory ever or too scary or anything like that. Like it's not the Texas Chainsaw Massacre,
right.
Or anything like that, because I do want it to be relaxing, like I said. So I'm trying to find the world that lives there between, being creeped out and falling asleep. But also that's my personal taste. I do consider myself to be a huge horror fan. Most of my, DVD collection is, that genre, and all of my taste in literature is. But it's never, like I said, I've never been into slashers or anything like that. I'm pretty open with the fact that gothic horror, supernatural horror is my jam.
Cool.
And I think I was just thinking about the writing, and before I started, I was thinking what do I want to write about every week, and what are my favorite novels or collections of stories. And, my taste has always been, Wuthering Heights is one of my favorite novels, or The Haunting of Hill House, anything Shirley Jackson, Angela Carter, Anne Rice. What was the other thing I was going to say? Edgar Allen Poe.
Right.
That's the world that my imagination, I guess, stays in. And I could write about it forever, I think.
Right.
And really, it's the only fiction that I take in, at least now that I'm out of, once you're out of school and you have to pick your own books. I know that sounds so silly, but I'm no, I know where my heart goes to, I'm not interested. I'm very particular with what I take in. I kind of get made fun of by, my partner or my mom or my friends when they want to go see a movie. And I'm I really am not interested in most things. My interests are very narrow, and I like creepy things. I like beautiful things. I like old things.
Right.
And that's kind of it.
Well, everybody's got their own tastes, and you're right about the school thing. You go, starting in high school, they assign you books. Before that too, but those don't count, like Goosebumps. Who gives a shit? But they assign you these things, and that's kind of where you feel out where you like things or what you like. And then when you become an adult, you're like, oh no, nobody's guiding me. What do I do?
Yeah.
So you walk around like a Chapters or an Indigo, that's a Canadian bookstore, and you go, that looks like it might be interesting. You spend 5 minutes reading it and you gamble, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, and you did mention things like Poe and Anne Rice, and it's kind of funny because I was thinking to myself, if Edgar Allen Poe did a podcast, it would be yours.
Oh, that's extremely flattering. Thank you.
The atmosphere that you kind of bring into every episode, and your writing style, and the certain tone and creakiness, I guess you got to say, that you add to your voice, really adds to the storytelling, the campfire, if you want to call it that, sharing of spooky tales, and it's a really fun listen. And I try to listen to it at work because work is boring. And I'm like, you're right. And some of the, I guess, reviews are say, it's a great thing to fall asleep to. I do find myself being like, this is very relaxing. I can't listen to it at work. So I don't know if I hope that's a compliment. It's meant to be one.
Absolutely. That's how it started. I did have some people, I feel like I need to speak in my podcast voice for your listeners to get the idea, but you get the idea.
Go for it. You can excerpt from your latest episode, your 51st, which is quite a milestone. So congratulations on that.
Oh, thank you. No, I just meant speak in the creepy voice. But, what was I saying? I lost my thing now.
Train of thought there. That's all right.
Oh, when I started out, I wanted it to be a bedtime podcast.
Right.
Because I'd listened to a few where the idea was either over, meditation or just rambling, which is very easy to fall asleep to. But I don't know. I guess I was at the same time, I want to I want people to listen to it and then feel like, okay, now I can go to sleep after it. Or if you fall asleep in the middle of it, that's fine too. Most people say they give it one listen when they're trying to go to sleep and another when they're awake so that they get the end of it,
Right.
of the story.
Mm-hmm.
But some people have said like that it actually does scare them because everybody's threshold for fear and horror is different.
Absolutely.
So some people are like, no, I'm way too scared. Like I have to listen to it with all the lights on, which
That's a compliment.
Yeah. And some people are like, oh, I listen to it on my drive to work, so I better not fall asleep. So really, I think whatever you get out of it is worth it, Like I loved The Adventure Zone, but I need to listen to it I needed to listen to it a few times to actually understand what was going on because for me, I just like I said, I have trouble falling asleep or, when I'm alone, like just to feel less nervous, I like putting a podcast on just because it's comforting to hear people's voices. And that's what I used that podcast for. I just found that the McElroy brothers were so affable that I was like, I just want to hear them chattering about something. But I wanted to go back and actually listen to what the hell was going on that show and not just use it for that purpose. But, whatever you use it for, hey, like as long as you're listening, I'm happy.
Yeah, well, that's kind of an artist thing, right? Like you have your own purpose for making something, and then whatever people get out of it is what they get out of it. And that's, as somebody who's written books and does a podcast, whatever you get out of it, I'm okay with that, whether that's the intended purpose or not. I assume you feel the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, that's the nature of, art. Like you said, if you get too hung up on how people are receiving it, you're going to drive yourself crazy.
Yeah. And then it doesn't become art anymore. It becomes like a science, right? Like, no, 2 + 2 has to equal 4. But what if they want it to equal 5?
Yeah.
Right? That's why you go to art. Because you think, I don't want this structure. I want something I can interpret and take for my own. That's why I think people get very defensive about their favorite books or movies, because it's personal to them. They get something out of it that somebody else doesn't.
Yeah. I'm for sure one of those people, like, especially with books. Like I said, The Haunting of Hill House is one of my favorite books, and everybody's like, oh, you must love the Netflix series. And I'm like, I'm afraid to watch it. Like, not because I'm afraid to watch it, but
they might ruin it.
Yeah, I'm like, I feel like I'm just going to be screaming at the TV and people are going to be angry at me, and like whoever I'm watching it with is going to, go nuts. And I just, I probably will one day, and I'm going to have to tell myself to be okay with it.
Right.
But it happens. It happens. And yeah.
I mean, the show was pretty good. I'm not going to lie.
I've been told.
Yeah. It has a couple.
I should definitely watch it.
Yeah. I mean, if you can distance yourself from it, like the original, literature from it, and then watch it kind of open-minded, you'll probably enjoy it like a lot. But yeah, that's kind of the issue with going from books to movies or books to TV shows, whatever. If you read the original material, you're probably going to hate the interpretive version.
Yeah, but I've had some instances, like one of my favorite things in general is Dark Shadows. Like the original. Well, actually, I started with the remake from, I think it was 91.
Right.
And I loved it. It's so cheesy and ridiculous, but I loved it. And I went back to watch some of the original soap opera, and it's like disastrous in a lot of ways, but it's also really fun.
Yeah.
And then Tim Burton's remake, again, disastrous in a lot of ways, but really fun. And I'm actually the first to like defend it a little, even though I absolutely should not.
Right.
For a number of reasons. Like it's a mess of a film, but like I'm the first one to be like, no, just give it a chance. It's like, you'll have a good time. Yeah,
it was like The Room. It's bad, it's awful, but you can enjoy it because it's so bad and awful.
And I feel like, sometimes Tommy Wiseau gets so upset because people think it's hilarious, but he's also enjoying his fame. And I want to be like, just Shouldn't you just be happy that people love it?
Right, yeah, for what it is.
I don't know, but then again, if I say that, but then I imagine if people did that to my podcast, I'd be
exactly right.
Whatever.
Yeah, it's hard to put yourself in that position because you can always turn around and play the card. Oh, I meant to do it that way, and then go cry in the shower for an hour.
Yeah.
But I don't think anybody's going to have that issue with your cast there. It seems to be quite popular. The reviews are obviously through the roof. I don't think I've seen anything less than a 5-star on any platform. Am I wrong?
Thank you.
I don't think I've seen anything less than 5.
I found a 4 somewhere.
Did you like delete it and scream at the person?
No, well, it was just a rating. It wasn't a review.
Oh, they didn't give you the review? Oh.
I don't know. For a second, I found myself, being like, oh, who did it? What's wrong? Like, what's wrong with it?
Right.
And then I thought, okay, 4 is good. And
4 is still good, yeah.
Let it go.
Mm-hmm.
Like, someone one day is going to give it a 1 and I'm just going to have to,
And that's not their cup of tea. You're not going to win everybody.
Oh, no. And
that's the first thing you have to acknowledge as an artist, which I'm sure you're well aware of.
Yeah, it's tough. And like as an actor, there are some people who never read reviews as a rule. Mm-hmm. I'm not one of those people. I think maybe I should be. I don't know. That whole like millennial, please validate me. Please validate everything I do thing for sure seeps in.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you're right. You just have to be like, not everyone is going to like what I'm doing, and that's okay. They shouldn't, like I would hope not everybody liked it because it is quite a niche thing,
Yeah.
I don't
absolutely.
know. But then again, those people probably aren't looking for a ghost story audio drama podcast.
And which is a very niche thing, like you said.
Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, I mean, the fact that the people who have found it do enjoy it is pretty much all you can ask for. Yeah.
I was very surprised and pleased when I started seeing positive feedback over the last year. Mm-hmm. I didn't really I didn't start it with any expectations, to be honest. I kind of was like, I want to do this. It'll be like a fun thing to try out. Maybe some of my friends will listen. Who knows? Mm-hmm. And as I've seen people that I don't know come out and be like, oh, I really like this. I really quickly started taking myself more seriously. Mm-hmm. Which sounds like, I'm this year I'm trying to go into this, not in a self-centered way, but I think at a certain point you have to learn, and especially for women in horror, mm-hmm. bringing it back to Women in Horror Month, like, you have to be loud and you have to be your own biggest fan, right? Like I used to downplay it for a long time, be like, yeah, it's just this thing I'm trying. It's not for everyone.
Right.
And then somebody told me like, don't talk about it like that, like you love it, right? And I'm like, yeah, I do. And I was thinking about how if I'm willing to go up to people and be like, oh, you have to read The Haunting of Hill House. Like it's the best, Right. And do that with other people's work. Why would I not want to do that about my own work?
Absolutely. Yeah. It does take a certain sycophantic nature in order to be a self-made artist or writer or whatever, performer. Mm-hmm. Because like I'm a guy in horror and I'm very much like how you said you were. Like people are like, oh, what do you do? I'm like, oh, nothing. I don't think any of my friends know about this podcast.
It's a weird thing, right? Because people see you as one way.
Yes.
I think, especially with podcasts, mm-hmm. because it's your voice. You don't have to put your face out there however much you want to or don't want to. Mm-hmm. Not that matters, because you're still going to just reach the people you reach.
Exactly.
But like, that's the weird thing. I had a fear myself of like showing that side of me to people. Mm-hmm. And when people like coworkers or family members would be like, "Oh, I listened to your podcast," like I would freak out. Like, no, it's such an intimate thing.
Exactly. And sometimes you have to share that with the closest people to you.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've kind of just been like, I made myself try to get over that, because if for nothing else, like I want more listeners. But yeah, maybe people, I guess people deserve to know that side of you too.
Yeah. But it's up to you to share that. If you don't want to share that, you don't have to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
If you want to get the word out, then yeah, you got to tell people. And generally, your friends will be your biggest supporters. They'll tell you, I shared this with the people at work, or I told other people about it, stuff like that, which is scary. Because it's one thing for another person on the internet to find your stuff and either like it or not like it. But when it's a friend or a family member, and then you have to see them like on a regular basis or something, like they're going to think of you differently because you do a horror podcast, or because you write about this, or you take photographs of that. Are they going to think differently about you? Because like you said, people have a preconceived, whatever, one of those words, notions of who you are based on your relationship.
Yeah.
And you tell them you do something like this, and they're like, I had no idea, you're not the same person to me anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know. For me, it's that my way of navigating the world in reality is like through humor and being really silly and clumsy, and here, most of my friends kind of know me like that, and I'm like, that's actually not how I feel at all. Like, I have no interest in comedy. Right. I don't know. Yeah,
I totally get you. It's a weird feeling being a creative person.
Sorry.
No, go on.
Yeah, I guess I was just thinking about, like, you have to take down your defense mechanisms to create, I think, good, honest art, whatever your art is. If it is comedy and that's how you express yourself, then that's great. In my case, you know what I mean? It's the other way around.
Right.
Just like how some of the most serious people, I think, are the best comedians.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you have to break down those barriers to create something that I think really resonates with people. Yeah.
And in your case, like, comedy is more socially accepted form of communication, right? You don't walk into a store and be like, the end is nigh.
I could, though.
You could
try it.
But then you'd be like, you're not allowed back here. Please don't ever come back. So it's a fine line. But, also a lot of the I guess, funniest people, like you said, are super serious. Like Stephen King and Dean Koontz are funny as hell. Mm-hmm. If you've ever read any of their blogs or website, they're really witty, smart, clever people.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's interesting what you said about comedy being a more socially acceptable way to be, which is absolutely true. And I think, something interesting that I guess I've struggled with, and I'm sure you have too, being a horror fan and podcaster and photographer, is that if people don't get horror, then I think they think something of you that's like, couldn't be farther from the truth. Like, we're not...
They assume you go bathe in blood and kill babies on weekends or something.
Yeah, exactly. I think some people, like, literally will be like, so what, you're into like gross things? And I'm just like, no, actually, like, it's quite a vast genre. And I think the people who love it are some of the warmest people you'll ever meet.
Absolutely. I mean, like, well, you were at Horrorama, and did you meet any assholes there?
I don't think so.
No,
I'm going through my my experience. No, I didn't.
Most of the vendors were super friendly and a little introverted at times, but for the most part, if you made the effort, they were super willing to talk and chat and stuff.
And I think that's the thing is when you spend your life growing up, you know, liking something that not a lot of people around you like, when you find that community, it's so great.
Yes.
And I think that's why people are so, like, we didn't see any assholes there, because we're just so happy to be around each other. You know?
Yeah.
It sounds very kumbaya when I say it like that, but that's how how it feels for me.
Yeah, it's an accepted circle. Like in your everyday life, as we've said, you don't really talk about horror with your friends unless your friends are into that, or mostly like acquaintances. You wouldn't go to like a work colleague and be like, "Oh, I watched this great, you know, slasher flick or whatever it was on the weekend," because you're not sure if they're into the same thing. And it's socially unacceptable to, you know, like serial killers or murders or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, something I've been loving your podcast, specifically going through the different demons and demonology. That's always something that, like, I've been super fascinated with, is both demonology and angelology and everything to do with that. You know, I think it's such an interesting mythology, and I was raised Catholic, and you don't get into that stuff, you know, like, and if you are, I think people think it's, you know what I mean? Like it's really
taboo.
Like, why are you so interested in this? And it's like, I'm not a Satanist, Mom. Like, and to be like, I'm not becoming a Satanist. I'm not saying I'm going to summon a demon. Like, it's just that for me, it was in the same way. I used to be so obsessed with Greek mythology or Roman mythology, Norse mythology, all kinds of mythologies. And then when I learned there was this whole mythology in Christianity that they never taught me, I was like, that's fascinating.
Absolutely.
Like, is that not in itself like a, I don't know.
It's a good
I don't want to say but like, I don't know.
Well, I mean, since you were raised Catholic, kind of going back to the interview style, what does your family kind of think of your podcast? You ever rub elbows the wrong way with anybody because of it?
They love it.
Okay.
Which is great. I mean, they've known for a long time that, like, I really love dark things and creepy things. And you know what? I have to say, so, I mean, I wouldn't call myself a practicing Catholic now. And I mean, I definitely wouldn't call myself a practicing Catholic now, but my family is also not, like, my immediate family is not super religious. Right. Some in my extended family are. So, you know, I never had to butt heads with anything like that, you know, which I'm grateful for. I do have some people in like I said, in my extended circle who are very Catholic and who do not want anything horror related in their life, because to them, it's just evil. Right. And it's just like, we just block off that element of media, you know, like it doesn't exist. And to me, I'm like, that's so, you're cutting out so many wonderful things, so many wonderful books and films, but that's fine. If that's, you know, that's their decision. But in my own family, like, I started reading Anne Rice when I was like 12, which is way too young.
A little bit too young. Yeah.
Because I didn't have any censorship in my life. Like, I fell asleep with the TV on since I was little. Like, I had it, you know, I could watch whatever I wanted. I remember I rented Interview with the Vampire at the movie store first when I was like 12 or 11. And I was like, Mom, can I get this? And
she's like, Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt. Yeah.
Yeah. My mom is a cinephile and, like, never discouraged me from watching anything I wanted to watch or reading anything I wanted to read, which I appreciate. And when I started getting really into Gothic horror, she was the first to, like, be like, I bought you this shirt. It has a skull on it. I thought it seemed like you. I'm like, well, I don't actually want to like wear skulls.
Right.
Like, but it was nice that, you know, she was just happy that I was interested in something.
Right.
You know?
That's good.
So my father was a film score composer who sort of established his career composing music for horror movies. Mm-hmm. So he is fairly established in the horror community.
Okay.
But he doesn't really love movies in general. So he doesn't watch a lot of horror movies or take in a lot of horror. That being said, he wouldn't possibly be able to judge me for getting into horror.
Right.
You know, when he like composed the score for Prom Night and My Bloody Valentine, you know, I can't really, what's he going to say about me having a career in horror?
Right.
So yeah, they really like the podcast. Coming back to the present tense, they really enjoy it. They told everyone else in the family to listen to it, which is really nice. So we had a family event recently, and the amount of aunts and uncles who came up to me and were like, I listened to your podcast. It was great. It's scary for me because I'm like, no, again, like, I don't want you to know that side of me, but thank you so much for listening.
Yeah. Again.
So I've been very lucky in that way.
That's good. Yeah. Support system's always integral to anybody. And like you said, with us being sort of that millennial age, I guess, is criticism's tough. For some reason, we don't like it. I accept it. I think it's a good way to improve, so long as it's not like, you suck, stop doing it. If people say, I don't like it, and they have a reason, perfect. If they say, I don't like it, why? I don't know. I just don't. Then I don't find that like a valid criticism. I just throw it away. Mm-hmm. Right? And sometimes it's hit or miss, I guess, I find with family and friends, whether they're honest with you or not. Mm-hmm. You know, like I never get my wife's opinion on any creative stuff I do because she's going to say, oh, I love it. Even though she probably doesn't.
Well, you know, it's interesting because, my boyfriend, he does like the podcast a lot, but there's certain episodes, like the Through Line episode, he gets episodes, any ones that are named after a tarot card or, inspired by, which is a little hard to fish out. It's more in the advertising. Mm-hmm. But there are a series of episodes about the narrator herself. And he's like, I don't know. I think those are my least favorite because I'm confused. Like, I don't know what's going on. And I'm like, but that's the point. And I get into that. And like, you don't get it because you don't like poetry. And I'll argue it a little bit.
He didn't leave.
But I also sort of take comfort in the fact that it's like, that's the side of him that hates this movie that I really love. Mm-hmm. You know, like we have very different taste in most things, like literature and film and things like that, and TV. So I'm like, it makes sense that, he wouldn't like some of those. And I've encountered some people who have the exact opposite opinion, who really love the Through Line episodes and are not so much about the one-offs. So I kind of take that the same way. I try to take like the 4-star review, like just as, all right, that's fine. Right. Or anybody who, doesn't love it.
And like we said, you're going to come across people who just, it's not their cup of tea. Nothing wrong with it. Right?
Yeah. Do you, have you had any issues being a horror fan with, within your own family or anything like that?
No, not really. Again, like I'm very closed off in my inner circle about this sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. I've written a couple of books. Nobody in my family's read them. And when I found out my mother-in-law bought one of them, I'm like, oh no. She's gonna tell me to divorce her daughter now. Like, it's like some of the stuff in there, like, I know is really messed up, in terms of imagery, especially.
Yeah.
But no, I've never, they don't know. And if they know, they don't mention it. Like, I don't know if anybody's ever listened to this podcast in my family. Pretty much every listen I've got has been from some person on the internet that I've never met. Although I've had some conversations with people, which are nice. You get to meet some people through this. But yeah, no, I guess backlash is the word.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
that's good. Sorry, what were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say, like, we've talked about your podcast a whole lot, but we never mentioned where people can find it. So, plug away.
You can find it at my website, which is kristinzaza.com/podcast, which is the best URL anyone could come up with, I think.
It does the trick.
Sorry?
It does the trick.
Yeah. So yeah, you can go to my website. You can also find it pretty much anywhere you listen to podcasts. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, you can find it. Right. Yeah, although the most helpful would be Radio Public. As a part of their paid listens program, every listen there you get a small amount that goes towards you, and it's free to use. I sound like I'm a walking ad for them. I just think it's a great idea. So I legitimately just like them as a
host or provider,
as a host,
whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. That'd be helpful. But yeah,
awesome.
That's that.
Any other social media? I know you've got a Patreon. Feel free to plug that.
Oh, yeah. So my Patreon page is, you can find it at patreon.com/darkcoldnight. And I just started a thing, I think over a month ago, where I had a few people asking if a soundtrack was going to come out. So I just made it available to any Patreon donors. So for any amount a month, you can have access to the soundtrack. Yeah, which was cool and exciting. And I also have a Ko-fi page if you just want to donate one time and aren't interested in the soundtrack. You can go to ko-fi.com/darkcoldnight. And also, you can follow me on Twitter at A Dark Cold Night, Instagram at Dark Cold Night Podcast, or on my Facebook page.
Awesome. You mentioned the soundtrack. I know I thought this was going to wrap up, but do you do the soundtrack yourself?
Yes.
Oh, that's incredible.
Oh, thank you. It's I wish it sounded a little bit, I would like it to sound a little bit better because I do everything. I guess the word would be acoustically. Like, I don't have a MIDI controller at this time or anything. So everything is just me recording me playing the guitar. It used to be me playing the piano, but I don't have a piano anymore. So now I'm just like, okay, got to get better at the guitar. And yeah, so that's that. It's tricky. Doing it that way. And my goal is to, eventually get a MIDI controller to do the music more digitally and,
a little crisper sort of thing. But the acoustic side of it really adds to the atmosphere, I must say, because it's just that type of tone that goes with the rest of the podcast.
Well, thank you. I have thought about that. I have thought about, like, if I did, do it all through GarageBand or whatever and edit it into this digital sound, if that would take away from it. So I'm not sure yet, but yeah, one day I'll find out, I suppose.
Fair enough. No, that's awesome.
Thank
you.
The
musical element it's super important in any audio thing. Because have you ever watched a horror movie without the soundtrack? It's just like a bunch of people running. It's scary. So yeah, it adds a lot of atmosphere, and the fact that you can do it yourself is amazing. That's something I've never been able to do, so I'm super jealous.
Oh, well, thank you very much. It's some weeks because usually I do try to have, I think there's maybe only one episode without a musical element, just because there was so much like vocal editing and stuff, and it just didn't suit that one episode. But when I do it every week, it's hard. Like usually it's not very long. There's like 1 or 2 minutes of something, whether it's an actual song or just something atmospheric. But one week recently, I wrote a little song and put it in, and then I was like, this is very similar to one that I wrote like 6 months ago. But I do it the same way that I write the stories. I do it all. I record the podcast, and then I'm like, okay, better come up with some music, and then I record some music. It's not like I sit there composing for hours.
Right.
So sometimes it feels kind of the writing and the composing is kind of stream of consciousness, right. I guess is how I like to think of it. And yeah, so I'm glad to hear that you find it effective. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's going to bring us to the end. It's been 45 minutes. It's a good time. So I want to thank you again for coming on, sharing your story and your process and just kind of shooting the breeze for a little while. So
thank you so much for having me. This was awesome.
You're more than welcome. Is there anything more you want to add? Feel free.
I think that's it.
Pretty much covers it? Awesome. Yeah. Alrighty. So again, that was Kristin Zaza, and you can find her podcast at kristinzaza.com/podcast. Pretty simple. So once again, I would like to thank Kristen for coming out and spending some of her time talking with me and letting us know what it's like to be a woman in the horror sort of industry. If you are interested in the month that is Women in Horror, you can absolutely check it out at womeninhorrormonth.com. They have a bunch of great different resources, different events, a whole bunch of news featuring women in horror. And the sad truth is that, unfortunately, many of these spectacular, very talented women are overlooked in the industry. It's such a shame, but hopefully the Women in Horror Month website and the cause can help bring some of that talent to the forefront and have them more recognized in the field. Once again, that's womeninhorrormonth.com. Now, of course, if you do want to find out more about me and what I do, check out horrorshots.com or any social media platform such as Instagram at horrorshotsphotography, Twitter at horrorsshotspod, or on Facebook at facebook.com/horrorshots. Of course, if you do like the episode, feel free to leave a review. They're very much appreciated, and I love reading what you guys have to say. I don't care if it's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 star. Let me know what you think. I'm always looking to improve, and I can't do that unless you tell me how. But of course, if you think it's perfect, leave a 5 star. So until next week, where I may continue my look at death again, or maybe I'll feature another woman in horror, depending on who I can find and who would let me talk to them for, half an hour or so. Until then,